Once I was in Warsaw at a meeting of business leaders and educators. The atmosphere was exactly what you would expect. Polished presentations, managerial language, strategic forecasts, and the usual practical question: what kind of people should universities produce for business? At one point, the CEO of a very large global corporation gave a presentation explaining what kind of employees, in his opinion, higher education should be preparing. The logic sounded familiar and efficient. Universities, from that point of view, exist to supply the market with competent, ready-to-use professionals who can immediately fit into corporate systems and perform useful functions. That idea sounds reasonable, and that is precisely why it is dangerous. Then an elderly rector from Britain took the floor, and his response immediately changed the room. He said, in essence, "You are mistaken if you think the purpose of universities is to prepare employees for you. The purpose of quality education is something much larger. It is to teach a person how to learn, how to think critically, how to explore, how to generate ideas, how to challenge assumptions, and how to create meanings and foundations that society will need not only now, but for decades to come." That is the real distinction. Training prepares a function. Education forms a mind. Modern society very often confuses these two things. It treats education as if it were simply a service sector for the labor market. A university becomes a factory of credentials. A student becomes future labor. Knowledge becomes a tool of immediate productivity. And everything that cannot be quickly monetized begins to look suspicious, inefficient, or useless. But quality education has never been only about utility. If education is reduced to job preparation alone, then society may indeed get more obedient specialists, more efficient middle managers, more technically competent staff. But it may lose something far more important: independent thinkers. It may lose those capable of questioning the system itself, not merely serving it. It may lose those who create new ideas instead of just implementing old ones. That is where real education begins. A truly educated person is not simply someone who has memorized information or mastered a narrow specialization. A truly educated person knows how to learn beyond instruction. They know how to ask better questions, compare frameworks, detect contradiction, challenge lazy assumptions, and remain intellectually alive in the face of complexity. This matters because the world does not stand still. The biggest problems of the future will not be solved only by people trained to follow existing procedures. New challenges demand imagination, moral seriousness, intellectual flexibility, and the ability to think outside inherited models. That is why critical thinking, creativity, philosophical depth, and curiosity are not decorative extras. They are civilizational necessities. A society that produces only useful employees may become efficient for a while. A society that produces thinkers can renew itself. This is why the best universities in history were never merely technical workshops for industry. They were places where ideas were tested, where traditions were questioned, where disciplines met and argued, where students were not simply taught what to think, but pushed to discover how thinking itself works. That kind of education is slower. It is less immediately measurable. It may even look less practical from the perspective of quarterly business interests. But it is far more valuable in the long run. Because the person who has learned how to learn can adapt. The person who has learned how to think can build. The person who has learned how to question can innovate. And the person who has learned how to create meaning can move culture itself forward. This is especially important in an age obsessed with speed, metrics, and employability. The labor market changes too fast for narrow training to remain sufficient for very long. Skills become obsolete. Tools change. Industries shift. Technologies replace tasks, but the ability to learn, think, synthesize, and reorient remains durable. That is what quality education protects. It protects the human capacity not merely to fit into the present, but to shape the future. This also explains why the humanities, philosophy, literature, history, and fundamental sciences remain important, even when they do not produce instant profit. They train perspective. They deepen judgment. They make a person harder to manipulate and easier to trust. They help create citizens, creators, and serious human beings, not just workers. And that may be the core issue. Business often wants reliability. Education at its best should produce freedom. Not chaos, not arrogance, but the freedom of a mind that can stand on its own feet. A mind that can learn continuously, question respectfully, and invent courageously.